now you have met our panel and you've got a sense of what they do. But really what we're talking about today is how they're involved in the sustainability and green debate. Let's start with Andy Hornby. I suppose the first one is, what's convinced you to actually get involved and take a lead personally, but also with a big organisation and one of our leading restaurant groups, i.e. the Restaurant Group? What convinced you?
It sounds a bit of a cop-out, but pressure from customers, pressure from particularly the teams within the organisation across all of our various different brands as to what we were doing and what we weren't doing. And I have to say, a bit of a sense of ignorance on my part that I wasn't 100% sure if what we were doing was enough and what we could do to do a lot more. And I think hospitality is really complicated in this area. I happen to have worked in retail before, where it is much simpler to know how to improve your footprint and what you can and can't do, and you're in control of much more of the consumer interaction because you have more of the supply chain. Whereas in our industry, and we'll come on to talk about it, I'm sure, when we come on to the Zero Carbon Forum, 90% of our emissions are in our supply chain. So, being really honest, I think we as an organisation didn't know enough of what we could do to improve our performance. So it sounds incredibly practical, but it was only by getting involved in industry-wide initiatives that we got that extra bit of knowledge that I think is now helping us start doing stuff.
As you say, we'll come back to the specifics in a minute. Hamish, not quite such a big business at Peach Pubs, based up there mainly in the Midlands and the home counties. So how did you get involved? Because you're taking a lead in this debate as well.
I think I did something. Peach has always been into provenance and sustainability. That's where we came from. We're founded as a great gastropub company, which inevitably means you're really taking care of the food. But in lockdown 2, whatever it was, January last year, we were safe and secure, and I just spent 2 months trying to learn about net zero because I knew nothing, and it was a bit of ignorance. But we had a determination to be one of the people who led, and now we've ended up trying to create a collaboration with other gastropub groups to lead the way.
And we'll be coming on to that as well, because I think collaboration's going to be a major part of what we talked about. Judy, you're Solbird, run Solbird, a couple of sites, but obviously well known on TV as well. But I mean, what's your personal commitment, and how did you get to where you are in terms of your green credentials?
I think it always starts at the top. And so for all these companies, the way that you lead usually comes from a personal ethos. And I am involved with City Harvest here in London. I've been involved with City Harvest in New York. And after working in hospitality for so many years, I think everyone has seen all of the waste. And the amount of food waste, it really breaks your heart. And growing up, I'm the daughter of a Korean War refugee. My father is a North Korean War refugee, and he has this, my mom calls it a sickness, where he cannot waste food because he grew up hungry. And when I was a child, even the smallest grain of rice, he would make my sister and I clean it up off our plates. And he said we would be scarred with a pockmark for every single grain of rice that we left on our plate. And that type of value has always carried me through my life. And so it just pains me to see so much food waste. And a third of all food produced globally is just wasted. And I think that all of us here, we see the amount of food insecurity that is also out there in the world, and the imbalance, the fact that there are nearly as many obese people in the world as they are starving, really shows you that there is a problem with the distribution of food.
Yeah, I think one thing becomes clear. I think it's such a big subject, and we've seen that over the last week or so at COP. I think probably what we want to get to is what practically can we do. Now, all three of you are doing something practical, so let's talk about that. So, Andy, let's start with you. Zero Carbon Forum. How did that come about, and what are you doing? And I know you've got some slides, so if you want to bring those, bring those up.
That's great as a starting. So, Mark Chapman, who I think is in the audience, has been working across the industry for many years, actually, in his own business, in looking at how we can improve our our carbon credentials, most simply. And he came up with what I thought was a brilliantly simple idea, which is, frankly, to bring together as many members, quite literally, from across the industry as were prepared to get involved, to share ideas, share practical developments, and try and help each other improve our carbon credentials. In terms of the practicalities, and it's just trying to avoid jargon along the top, the forum has set itself a very clear goal, which is to be carbon neutral or zero by 2030 for scopes 1 and 2, and by 2040 for scope 3. Again, cutting through all the jargon, it is actually really simple. Scope 3 is the supply chain, scope 1 and 2 is our own controlled areas. And to show you how complicated this is, only 10% of our industry's emissions are in scope 1 and 2. 90% are in scope 3. And that is why, if we have one simple message today, if we do not find a way of working together with our suppliers, we will not make progress. Because 90%, literally 90%, whether it be the transport part of the supply chain, whether it be the procurement part, whether it be the growing processes, it's in the supply chain. And then from a real practical, and this is a little bit of an advert, from a real practical point of view, the forum give you a roadmap, give each of us as members. Currently, there are just over 30 members, a mixture of restaurant brands and pub brands of all sizes. And you get, from supplying our own data, you have to be prepared to share everything and not mind that it's going to be used and given to everyone else. And from a personal point of view, we found it incredibly useful that you get, from the back, collaborative work streams and an actual roadmap for the company of how to get to net zero. And you get the idea of the number of people who have joined. And most importantly, and I'm not going to go through any of the detail on this last slide, but there are loads of roadmap areas where you're given not an answer, but at least a way of working together, ideas on transportation, ideas on the best way of offsetting where you're doing that or not. And if I can just say one last thing, do not feel if you're a small player you can't get involved, because actually the benefits, I believe, are bigger for small players because you get given the roadmap, and the whole point is we're only as good as what we can all do together. I'd be lying if I said it's an answer. Just repeat that first fact, 90% of our emissions are in the supply chain, so it is really early days. But for example, sounds amazingly, for people who've made massive progress, like Hamish, it sounds over basic. All of our brands next year, we will be neutral on scopes 1 and 2, because we're lucky, we're a big company, we've been able to move very quickly on fully renewable energy across all gas and across all of our basic sourcing.
Well, we have people from the supply...
But it takes longer in the supply chain, and you just got to be patient on that.
Well, we have people in the supply chain in the audience, so we're going to bring them in, actually, with their view, because I think you're absolutely right. But in terms of, before I move on to Judy and Hamish, within Restaurant Group, those first two areas, what are the practical things you've done? Because obviously Wagamama is probably, as it were, seen as one of your probably greener brands. But I mean, how have you moved already?
Yeah, Wagamama was the first of our brands, well ahead of the others. All credit to previous management teams to be fully renewable on energy purchasing, for example, and to move very early. I think the biggest thing I have to say on immediate practicality is if you're not seen to be acting on food waste, consumers will not forgive you. And more importantly, your own people don't forgive you. And your own people can see every single day if you are not acting on that. And I think that is absolutely critical. The second thing, bit of an elephant in the room, as we've all moved to delivery, if the packaging does not look right, if the packaging looks like you're not attaining sustainability quickly, if you look honestly across most of our brands represented in this room, most consumers think we've gone backwards with a move to delivery. So how to get your packaging right. But if there was two really simple, quick wins, I'd say concentrate on waste for your internal teams and the restaurants, and concentrate on packaging in terms, and finally move to fully renewable purchasing of both gas and electricity as quickly as possible. And believe you me, that feels expensive, but the strange thing about the energy crisis has just happened is the wholesale increase in energy costs is massively higher than the steps it requires to move to renewable purchasing.
Yeah. So let's move on to you, Hamish. It might be seen as a medium-sized business in terms of where we are on the panel today. Now, I mean, you're taking some active steps, but you've also got involved with a guy called
Simon Hepner of Net Zero Now. So a similar business to the Net Carbon. I'm going to say it wrong. Net Zero
Carbon Forum.
Zero Carbon Forum. So just a platform for measuring what you're doing and then working out.
But he
what to do
convinced
with
you,
it.
and we're going to hear from him now. So
okay, well,
let's run this video, and then you can tell us a bit more about how you got involved.
Hello, my name is Simon Hepner. I am the founder of Net Zero Now, and I'm absolutely delighted to see climate change right up there on the agenda today. The climate crisis is rapidly moving from theoretical concept to practical reality, something that affects our everyday lives. Over the coming years, we will see rising temperatures and increased extreme weather events, decimating harvests, disrupting supply chains, destroying livelihoods, and creating mass migration across the world. Working in the food sector, we find ourselves as both the cause of this crisis and directly affected by it. And it was this which prompted me earlier this year, working with colleagues to create Net Zero Now. Net Zero Now's purpose is to help businesses of all shapes and sizes take urgent climate action and get on the road to net zero. As a first initiative, we worked with the Sustainable Restaurant Association, Pernod Ricard and Coca-Cola to develop and pilot a net zero restaurant, pubs and bars protocol. The protocol defines what net zero means for these businesses, offers a route to get there, and provides a standard against which businesses that want to claim net zero can be certified. Following consultation with the wider industry, we launched in July this year and are now working across over 100 sites, including smaller independent sites, but also bigger businesses like Hawksmoor, Oaxaca and Stonegate. Peach Pubs were one of our original pilotees and have been incredible partners throughout, not just taking action in their own business, but also creating the Gastropubs Race to Zero to accelerate change in the sector. I'll leave it to Hamish to explain a little more about that, but he's also agreed to share data from the work that we have done together.
So, what have you done? And this is why it's so important for you guys to speak about, what practical steps, because I think there is this sense that, okay, what do we do? Where do we start? Where did you start?
You start by measuring, and that's what we're all hopefully starting to think about, is just know your numbers, because otherwise you can't do anything. Yeah. And shall I put that up?
Yeah,
now?
let's have a look at these slides about what you've been looking at.
That's the protocols. This is Peach. So we've got 10,000 tons of footprint, and at the moment, before we did renewable energy, our operations, that scope 1 and 2, would be 23% of the thing. It goes down to about 16% which we have now done the renewable energy. But the bit I learned, which excited me and challenged me, was that the food was 70%. The meat, in fact, was 44%, and the red beef was 70% of that meat. So my lovely gastropubs that serve steak and red wine, and will do, I think, forever, are going to be challenged by net zero. And that was my main lesson coming out of all the investigation I did, but then the measurement we started doing. Yeah. So we started working on that, basically.
And how far down the road are you? So what change are we seeing at Peach?
I don't think we're very far, in truth. The biggest lesson, I happen to be someone who believes in offsetting. I support a conservancy out in Kenya, And Peach has been doing that for many years. We did our first offset ever in 2007 when we grew 10,000 trees. So we're sort of already in a theory that you've got to do some good back if you're going to get to net zero. And I fundamentally believe that society has got to move faster than some of our targets, which the big boys will inevitably say 2040 at the moment, because they don't know their way forward. But smaller businesses, the SMEs, can actually say different things and should maybe take a lead and work out how to do things faster with compensation.
Now, Judy, one of the things, let's move on to Judy. One of the things you're doing is really concentrating on food waste. Is that, you see that as an area you can make most impact on?
I think it's an area that has significant impact, and you're actually killing two birds with one stone, especially with a charity like City Harvest, because you're feeding those in need as well. Yeah. So it's a food rescue organization, and everyone has so much food waste, all these grocery stores, all the expiring food, and then they pick it up and they deliver it to over 350 different charities or community centers, and they feed those who are in need. And that need went up tremendously during the pandemic.
And it has a double benefit. Actually, let's have a look at the video of that, because it gives a really good sense of what City Harvest is doing in London, very similar to what it does in New York. So what next for City Harvest, and what help do you need on that? What can people do practically on
well,
food
first
waste?
of all, anybody here that represents a supplier, a farmer, or a grocery stores, particularly the grocery stores, you should sign up. It costs you nothing, absolutely not. And there's no excuse, honestly. It's just about putting all of the food that's about to expire in one area and letting it to be picked up. And you just have to do it now. I think that there is no excuse. You know, it is a solution. It's a solution that does cost money, but we are providing you with that pathway so that it doesn't cost you money. So, yeah.
So we've already looked at some practical steps you guys are doing. I think you all admit it's early days for what you're doing. But what you said quite rightly, Andy, we are in a bigger ecosystem, and the supply chain is. Now, we're lucky enough to have some people from the supply industry in the audience. I want to get their reaction as well. I first want to call on Beth Cowell of the National Farmers Union. You can't get much more basic in the supply chain than our farmers. Beth, are you there in the room? Over there. Someone give Beth a mic, please.
Thank you very much indeed. It's fantastic to be here. Like you said, I'm from the National Farmers Union. I'm the Food Service Advisor, and it's really great to have this conversation because, like you said, most of these challenges sit within Scope 3. I don't know whether everyone's aware here that British farming is committed to net zero by 2040. We launched this in early 2019, and it's an enormous step for British food producers. You might have heard our president, Minette Batter, speak about it. But for us, this challenge sits across the supply chain. And for us to work effectively with end buyers of food, whether it's food service or retailers, I think we have to make meaningful partnerships. And we know that there's some farmers out there that are doing really well, that are committed to net zero and delivering it already, and there's some farmers out there that are still on this journey. So for me, it's about saying hello. We're here today to have as many conversations as possible, both about our commitment, but also about British farming. The other question I have is, from the panel's view, what steps can operators working with producers take to deliver these sustainability challenges? So how can we work in meaningful partnerships? Is there a role for operators to champion and incentivize? Like I said, there are some businesses out there already doing good. How can we incentivize everyone? And what can British food producers do? Because I know that from my perspective, we want to offer solutions to you for you to meet your net zero targets. So what can we do as British agriculture to help, as a collective effort? Thank you very much, Peter.
Thank you. Let's hold that thought, because I also want to bring I want to bring in Andrew Selly, who, of course, is CEO of one of our major partners here today, Bidfood. Andrew, have you got a mic? Can you get a microphone to Andrew down there? There he is, sitting just in here. I can see him from here. Andrew, I mean, because obviously you're not a producer, but you are, as it were, the middleman between a lot of farmers, and obviously not just in the UK and these guys here. What's your perspective, and what would you like these guys to do?
Well, I think the important thing is to get the forum where we can have that collaboration. So, as 90% of the emissions are the operators, clearly there are no wholesalers or suppliers on that forum. So I think that would be a good place to start. I think there's a massive understanding of how collectively we can reduce the impact, because 64% of our Scope 1 emissions are our 1,250 delivery vehicles going out every day. So to replace that or to minimize those food miles or increase the drop density is a massive CapEx investment, and that assumes that the technology exists at the moment to replace them like for like, which it doesn't. So I think there's lots of stuff that we need to do in terms of different ways of delivering, different times of delivering, different types of packaging, shelf life, etc. It's across the whole spectrum that is going to impact on our ability to reduce food miles working with the operators. So I suppose it's just understanding what you think would be the right forum to bring all those parties together, because there's no point in the wholesalers working with the manufacturers separate from the operators. It has to be up and down the chain looking at who's using what packaging, what's the benefit to shelf life, what's the impact on food waste, what's the impact on food miles, and how can we collectively get some initiatives around that.
And I think that, thanks, Andrew, and I think we've got it here, another question from Nick Brown at QSR Automations, which is about technology in kitchens, again, asking, as it were, operators what they can do to help reach those targets. So we've looked at two questions, I suppose. One is, as it were, working with the producers, working with the suppliers. How can we bring them into the tent? Or what's the sort of conversation you want to have, Andy?
Both brilliant questions, and I think the hard answer is we have to find a way, particularly the distributors, stroke wholesalers, stroke transporters, of having those conversations up front now, because without that, we are going to be literally solving 10% of the problem. Data, again, is really important, and what I would say to the producer's side is the more clarity you can have of the way that your food is being supplied and produced, that will give us no excuse. We have to have no excuse for our procurement teams knowing that they are doing the right thing, and they do. Being really honest, sometimes you're behind. We don't get the perfect comparative data on different supply sources. The more that, in just the same way as retailers have to show customers if the packaging is recyclable, because they know it's going straight to the customer. So I just encourage people down the supply chain, whether it be wholesalers or producers, to be putting that data to us, so we can't ignore it, and we mustn't ignore it. And I was going to say one thing on that, which I think Kate, I checked before this with Kate Nichols agreed with me, because I mean, Kate, who's done an amazing job in the last 18 months with just the tireless conversations and negotiations with government through COVID, she would honestly say, and I found it quite surprising when we suddenly were spending so much time with government pre-pandemic did think that we as an industry weren't taking this terribly seriously. I found that surprising, I'll be honest. I'm chief executive of a restaurant business. So to hear government say, and the reason is they don't see our interactions on it, because most of our emissions are further down the supply chain. So if we don't find a way of making those dynamics and those conversations with wholesalers and with producers clear, then I fear we will still look like we're not actually cracking it. So it's not easy, but if there's one simple thing, I'd say it's data. If you're a producer, make sure you provide data in a way we can't ignore it. And if you're a wholesaler or distributor, give us the information about the way your fleets are run, the way everything else is done, in a way that we can't ignore it. And we mustn't ignore it.
Yeah. And this is, in a sense, a matter of, it is about communication, because in a sense, you and Hamish are doing similar but very different routes with similar routes and talking to each other, but we need to have these conversations. I mean, Hamish, what's the sort of conversation you're having with your
This
suppliers?
was exactly why we set up this collaboration, because I wanted to have a debate with suppliers and other gastropubs about how we approached this, dealing with the supply chain. And we met, 2-3 weeks ago, first effort at doing a collaboration. It was really all about choosing, how do we choose the net zero products in the supply chain, or the best holistic choice that you can make about choosing a product where it's reduced carbon, but it tastes good and it's a good price.
Yeah.
And the suppliers have to tell you everything. Yeah. They can't just tell you one aspect of your choice. And you can't prioritize net zero over your business, is the truth, because you have to be in business.
Yeah. And Judy, I mean, is it more difficult or is it easier for as it were, a small operator, or are there more problems and perhaps more top-end restaurants?
I think it's a little bit of both. Like Hamish said, it has to make sense for the business, it has to make sense for the planet, and it has to make sense for your customers. And I'm just here next door in the Westfield Mall. I'm in the food court. Average price point per head between 10 to 15 pounds. There's only so much people are going to pay for a piece of fried chicken, So there's only so much you can pass down to the customer, and it's about balancing that of how much are people willing to pay for sustainability to save the planet. And right now, I think in a post-COVID time frame, people are very price sensitive, I'm seeing. There's only so much people want to pay for lunch, and then that's it. They don't want to go over that. So how strong is people's commitment to the environment, to the planet? Are they really willing for it to hit their wallet, is the question.
What do you find in the chef community? Because in a sense, we're talking casual dining and pubs, which is, as it were, mid-market in a sense, but obviously your background, I mean,
I mean, I think in quote-unquote, real restaurants, in my place here, you get a tray and a buzzer. There's nothing about it, right? But in where you actually have service, you can hide more costs than that because you're paying for the service. You're paying for the experience. And I think that you can have more net zero type items, but it's all about shortening that supply chain. And until I think the problem is solved with Brexit and workers in this country, it goes into food politics. Why is it cheaper for me? I go through 2 tons of chicken in a month. It's cheaper for me to buy chicken from Europe than it is in the UK, and that's due to supply and demand. And that comes into a food politics issue, it comes into government, economies, everything. It becomes a very, very complicated issue. And the government's going to have to step in and to support the suppliers, all of this, and for us to be more sustainable, for us to have a sustainable strategy that we can actually implement. Because if it's too expensive, it's never going to work.
Yeah. Well, I think what's clear is there is definitely a mood change within consumers and mood change within the industry at all levels. But I think it does come to that, as you all say, that practicality. One thing we do want to know from you guys is, I mean, we've got a slide here which has got 4 really basic things I think people can do if we could pull that up. But as we do, so basically it is, I think perhaps you'd agree, start to measure, talk to suppliers, get informed, which is what Hamish and certainly Andy started, and to begin with some of the simpler things, water, waste and energy. But also we want to hear from you. You will see on your table one of these things, a green commitment card. And what we really want to get is some feedback from you, the industry, about what you feel personally or your companies can do. So please, fill it out, put your name, organization, give your commitments, what you think you can do, and there is actually a physical post box at the back of the hall. So please post your cards in there sometime during today, and we'll look at it, and we'll be publishing that back through both the CGA website, but more importantly, the Peach 2020 website, and we'll be getting back to you. Because I think what's pretty clear is this is just the start of the conversation here and how we go forward. We'll be doing a podcast where we'll be bringing in a lot of the supplier side as well with the likes of Bidfood and the NFU and others as well. So this is a debate which will continue. I suppose, final word to the panel though, how optimistic are you guys about the targets, Andy?
It's hard. Getting it through the supply chain is hard. If I had one appeal for all of us, and this makes me more optimistic, is that it's easy to say Scope 3, 2040, none of us are highly likely to be in our jobs then. That is the easy thing to say. I think where it gets real is, Hamish, spot on. If you can have enough data so you can set yourself some 3-year targets, just small steps that you don't run away from, I think as an industry we will make real progress. If you don't step it down to those little targets, then it's too easy to put into, this isn't going to be my problem, it's going to be my successor's problem. So if we can break it into those little chunks, I am optimistic we can make progress.
Excellent. Well, look, we have run out of time. But the point about today was really starting this debate. It's really important. And so massive thank you to you three for, one, your commitment, but also sharing your progress. Thank you, Judy. Thank you, Andy. Thank you, Hamish.
Thanks, Peter.
Thank you.